We have a crisis in this country of men and boys. And for decades, candidly, we've neglected it because some of us have been scared to enter into the fray. Why was Charlie my first guest? Because I recognized his influence and how many young men and boys heard the bell and answered the bell in terms of organizing on campuses and supporting the dialogue and the organizational principles that Charlie Kirk was supporting and advancing. I think my party has not invested as much energy as they should in this space.
Governor Gavin Newsom right there says the Democrats could learn something from Charlie Kirk and how he mobilized young men across the country, something he says his own party has been hesitant to do. You heard him say it just there. The California governor is launching a statewide initiative calling for 10,000 young men to serve as mentors, coaches, and tutors through volunteer programs to address what he says is a crisis of men and boys. Joining us now, former communications director for the RNC and Republican strategist Doug Heye, New York Times opinion columnist David French, and CEO of Bridge USA, a youth movement addressing political division, Manu Meal. Everybody, thank you so much. David, I have been reading and listening to you in the op-ed pages and the op-ed audio at the New York Times talking about this moment and talking about or lamenting that this has scared people even more about talking to each other when they disagree with each other. Talk to me about how important it is to address people head on.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the one part, there's a lot that I disagreed with Charlie Kirk about, but one thing I really respected about him is that he would go to places where people disagreed with him fearlessly and engage in conversations, sometimes for hour after hour. And there were a lot of things that he would say that I would disagree with. There were things he would say that I would agree with. But he would be there and he would show up and he would talk and he would talk and he would talk. And one thing that I think the Democrats can take from that is you need to show up in places where you're in the minority politically, where you're deeply in the minority politically, and engage people face to face in conversation, and do so respectfully, do so civilly, but engage with people courageously. And I think if there's one takeaway here is that one positive takeaway as people learn from who he was and what he did is he went and he showed up. And I think that people from all sides of the spectrum could learn from that. Go where people disagree with you and talk to them at length.
So John Della Volpe, who is the pollster from Harvard who specifically polls young people, talked about this moment and what Democrats need to learn from Charlie Kirk. And he said what Kirk understood was that he wasn't going to convince a generation of young people off the bat or in a campaign cycle to move to the Republican Party, but that it was going to be a slow burn. So he showed up every day, he created a community, and eventually he started to make inroads on campuses because Democrats had just assumed that anybody who was young was going to vote for them. And that assumption turned out to be pretty wrong in the last election. Manu, are you seeing or hearing anything from the Democrats in these moments about a need to kind of adjust the way they do politics, adjust the way they reach out to not just young men, but young people broadly?
Well, Katie, it's good to be here with you this afternoon. Great to see you, David. I'm certainly not in the business of advising Democrats, nor am I in the business of advising Republicans. I'm in the business of building a large student-led organization that is multi-partisan to listen to people that are different than each other, because we need that right now more than ever. And I'll just tell you one thing, which is that the Democrats should not be criticizing Governor Gavin Newsom for this stance, because we live at a tribalistic moment where we knee-jerk criticize anytime our leaders take from the other side. It's actually a good thing for leaders to reach across the aisle and grab ideas, because there is certainly a certainty to the fact that Charlie resonated with young men. Here's the second piece. Students are ready to have the conversation. And the conversation, whether it's on young men, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on free speech, whether it's on women's rights, the possibility to create those spaces for conversation has to exist. And when leaders like Governor Gavin Newsom or Vivek Ramaswamy or others from across the political spectrum are saying, hey, they've got a bright idea, let me learn from that. That's exactly the type of leadership we need right now. And young people are looking for that leadership. And importantly, we're ready to reward it. That's what's different about this political moment.
Doug?
I agree. And look, as former comms director for the RNC, I love partisanship. And there are times when you should be partisan, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. But I also know from Capitol Hill that if you really want to get big things done, it has to be done on a bipartisan basis, unless you have unified government, which we have right now, but we don't always have. A Republican needs a Democrat on their side. Democrat needs a Republican on their side. I work with an organization called the Bipartisan Network, founded by my friend Holly Harris, who's been on MSNBC time and time again. And her focus is on specific issues, but where can we bridge those divides? Where can we get Republicans and Democrats to sit down and talk about issues together, find places of commonality so that they can then introduce a bill together, influence public policy in that direction. And it always turns out to be a good conversation.
It's interesting, Manu, because your generation in particular has come of age in the last 10 years, come of voting age in the last 10 years. Not to assume your age, but you're the younger generation. And politics since really 2012, 2010 has been kind of a zero-sum game. The other side is evil. And if you're not with us, then you're on the wrong side of history. I mean, you can't vote. If you vote with the other side, then you're a traitor to your party. It has not felt like there has been the possibility for any bipartisanship. Being exposed to that and seeing that and witnessing the way Washington has not worked has clearly been, pretty damaging.
Well, I'm young relative to you, and if you ask my brother, I'm really old. So I honestly, at this point, I don't know where I stand. I'll just say that as it relates to the current moment, it is now a politically advantageous thing to be bipartisan, and I get it. I mean, if you're an elected official, taking a stance that the other side agrees with removes you from the base. But as we talked about, Katie, last week, there's a new base. And young people are leading that base. That base is of people that are open-minded, people that believe in the search for truth, people that believe that it's important to work with each other, not for the sake of some kumbaya bipartisanship, but because that's actually how we solve our problems. And that base will reward problem solving over politics. And that is especially apparent after Charlie's tragic assassination. And I think right now, students see an opportunity, but what leaders need to understand is students take signals. And the signal that Governor Newsom is sending and others on the right have been sending is really positive, and that needs to stay up.
David, what about that? The example that's been set for the past decade and a half has not been the greatest one.
Boy, that's an understatement. I mean, from the top down in American politics, we've set a terrible example for America's younger generations. I teach college students at Lipscomb University, my alma mater in Nashville, and sometimes I just look at my young students, and I just say, I am sorry for the example you've been seeing. I'm sorry for the kind of politics you have seen growing up. And it's entirely incumbent on my generation to model the values we want to advance. And to pick up on something I said earlier, one of the things that happens when you show up in a place where maybe your views aren't popular is you might not make a lot of headway immediately and right away. But what you do is you tell your political allies who are there in those places that you're not alone, that you're not forgotten, and that there is hope for you to persuade. I think it's no accident that the Republicans adopted this very forward approach to blue areas, and they had increases. They did better in almost every blue area of the country when they intentionally went there and engaged. And you just don't see too many Democrats engaging, say, outside of Walmart in Columbia, Tennessee, where I used to live. That's just not something you see as much. And so people need to go and speak and listen, and it encourages people in their community who often feel abandoned and alone when they're in a minority political position.
And don't assume that what you see on the internet is the only thing that's out there, because it's an algorithm that is tailored to you. It's an algorithm tailored to what you think and what you click on and what you engage with. And oftentimes those are opinions that completely agree with your own opinions. So it's good to log off every
Katie,
once in a while.
I was at the RNC on that Saturday morning when Gabby Giffords was shot. I drove straight into the office, We had a conference call with colleagues from the Boehner office, the McConnell office, the congressional and senatorial committees. It was a very sober and somber conversation, a very appropriate conversation. And it's because our principals were all engaged in leadership. Nobody pointed a finger, except at ourselves. We held a mirror up to ourselves, not to the other party. I think when we have so many situations like this, whether it's the awful assassination of Charlie Kirk, an arson at the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania, and countless examples, the ballpark shooting of Steve Scalise,
The Minnesota lawmakers.
absolutely, for our political leaders to stand up and hold a mirror to themselves and talk about these kinds of things in appropriate and serious ways.
I think for
and
everybody,
that doesn't happen too much.
everybody across the country, everyone, top down, everyone, just take a second and think about the way you talk about politics, the way you engage with it, and ask yourself, is this making things better? I think we could all use a little bit of soul searching on that.